Hello again, class. I've received a couple comments that say that they feel like these videos or the video that for chapter one was really helpful and kind of pointed them in the right direction of what to study for the test. So I think that's a great thing that I'd like to keep doing if you all would still like it. I mean, it takes time and everything, so if you're not going to use it or you don't think it really helps, please let me know so that I don't have to waste my time. But if it's going to help you, then I don't mind wasting my time. Well, that didn't come out right, did it? Anyway, this is FHS 1230, and it's the chapter 2 talk through. This is one of my favorite chapters. I'll probably say that after every chapter, but um, it is hilarious because we talk a lot about the cognitive transitions that go on in adolescence. As the thinking, which is cognition, is a lot of thinking, changes from when you're a child to when you're a teenager. Now, children, and I taught elementary school for 30 years, so I'm pretty aware of this part. They think in here and now to what they can directly observe. Um, Little children don't wonder about things the same way that teenagers do, adolescents do. Teens will think in possibilities. As we all know, teens can argue very well and they don't mind doing it. Um, they can do the hypothetical thinking. What if, blah, 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 blah. Not once when I was teaching elementary school did I have a what if from the younger children. But when I taught high school math at Jordan High School, there were a lot of, well, what if this and what if that? And I got thinking, why are there so many what ifs? But it's part of the changes in the thinking. Um, they also, when you're given a task to do or something that they want to do, teenagers can think to themselves, do I have the skills to do this? Can I handle it? And that's a new thing with types of thinking. They do multidimensional thought, which means they can think of the same situation in many different ways. And one of the new things that comes about that is super obvious is abstract thinking. If you can't see it, you don't understand it as well when you're a younger child. But as you grow into adolescence, then um, you can think of things that are abstract. Now, some people aren't quite as cognitively developed at a certain age. And so when you jump into high school, if you're not quite to the abstract stage, you struggle a little bit, especially in math, because math uses a lot of abstract concepts. As a teacher, you have to know these developmental levels. One thing that you never use with younger children is sarcasm. They kind of get that it's funny, but they don't understand the concept of sarcasm, which is when you're in high school, a lot of people use sarcasm. Teachers do, your peers do. And so it kind of makes it fun, but it kind of makes it a little where you have to be careful on what you say and how you say it. Um, yeah, I think that's good. So another thing is Piaget, Jean Piaget is this developmental theorist, and I think you've probably heard of him. He does a lot of child development type of things, and I don't know how to pronounce Piagetian or Piagetian, depending on, I guess it doesn't really matter anyway. But um, he had a lot of success with these stages for Piaget, where you go as a baby and you can only do things with your senses. And then you go to number two, where you do more observing, and you keep moving up in steps on your cognitive development, your thinking skills. Um, and he's, like I said, very famous and has a lot of people who really agree with his theories, and some who agree with his theory, but then they want to build on it. And there's one man in your book. His name is Daniel Kahneman, Kahneman. It's not a big deal to know him, um, because he's just like this little paragraph in your chapter. But what he focused on was logic versus illogic. So when people do things that everyone seems to understand because it's logical, and when you get into your teen years, sometimes, and into adulthood, by the way, um, there are illogical things that people do. And both teenagers and adults can act quite illogically at times, as I'm sure you know. Um, and sometimes adults are more illogical than teenagers, but younger children aren't as illogical. You can predict pretty much what they're going to do, what they're going to say. Um, the example in your book says that, they did a study with people who had one positive outcome out of 10 tickets, so like one winning ticket in a pile of 10. And would you rather pick from the pile of 10, or would you rather pick from the pile that has 10 positive outcomes out of 100 tickets, which is 1 in 10 and 1 in 10? So you would think they'd be both the same, but a huge majority would rather pick out of the pile of 100. That's not logical because it doesn't really matter as long as the odds are the same. But that's the type of thing that Daniel Kahneman was talking about in his research using Piaget's theory. Oh, there it is. Good job. Okay, egocentrism is hilarious. This part is not on your test, but it will be part of your assignment, so you probably ought to know this. But sometimes as teenagers' brains develop, they have this idea that the whole world revolves around them, you know. Some adults never lose that, I'm afraid. Um, One thing they call the imaginary audience is where you and your behavior, you think everybody is watching you. In a group of 10,000 people, you can't wear like a funny dress or a funny shirt or something because you know everybody will notice you. And so if you just have one person, like here it's the chicken wearing the glasses, right? And he thinks everybody will be staring at him. In real life, we know that, the more people, you're not going to be noticed. It's like trying to find somebody in a football game that's sitting on the other side. Personal fable is the idea that your experiences are unique. No one has ever gone through that experience. And my teenagers used to say, "Oh, Mom, you don't know. You never dated." And I'm like, "Oh, well, how do you think I met your father?" That kind of thing. And this would say, "How would you know you haven't been through what I have?" And it seems like it's very hard for teenagers to accept that they aren't the most unique being in the universe. Invincibility fable is the idea that I know things go on, but it's not going to happen to me, which is a lot of your unplanned pregnancies. It's not going to happen to me. We'll just do it once without protection, and I won't get pregnant. Um, you're not invincible, which is why I put the Hulk in there. But, like if you see someone that's been drinking and they tell you they'll give you a ride home. So you get in the car, you know all the stats about impaired driving, yet you get in anyway because you kind of think, well, it's not going to happen this time. And so those are three of the things that are kind of, they're fun to watch, but they're kind of unique to teenagers. Hopefully people outgrow them in adulthood. Okay, the next section is information processing, which information processing likes Piaget as a base, but it takes his ideas and makes them more like specific. Instead of saying this is a stage and here's the next stage and here's the next stage, this is, I want to know what I'm looking for. Well, I'm looking at people's attention. How well can they divide their attention between two sources? How well can they pay attention to their teacher even when other stuff is going on around them? In adolescence, it gets better, but it's still not great. Okay, let's skip memory for a minute. Speed, the speed of thought, the speed of processing increases. And then organization is when you know what works for you. Let's say the type of studying that you do. You know that in order to learn vocabulary words, you are very successful with flashcards. And so that's what you focus on. You don't go trying weird things for a test that you know might not work or you're not really sure. You'll go to the things that you know that work for you. So let's focus a minute on memory, the reminiscence bump. And you know, because I'm focusing on it, it's probably on your task. So um, the reminiscence bump looks at when you're an adult and you're looking back at your adolescence. It's as an adult, those are where you remember like details about people and places and events that happened in your teenage years more strongly than other memories. And it's not just because childhood was longer ago than that. There's something with your memories are encoded in your memory section of your brain more strongly and deeply during adolescence. So the memories actually are going to stay in there. Um, and if you think about if you're finished with adolescence, you can look back and like I had a bicycle accident when I was a teenager, and in my memory, I still remember the hill that I rode down, the falling because the grass was wet and I was not smart enough to know not to ride down that hill. What it felt like when I cut my leg open, um, what it felt like to try to walk back to my house and have my dad take me to the doctor. What it felt like when the doctor pulled out the fat in the back of my leg so he could stitch it together and showed it to me. And my stomach kind of goes bleh because of that. But I mean, those are like really specific memories. And it happened like when I was, gosh, I think I was 14. I was a freshman um, in high school in 19, oh gosh, 73. So, yes, I'm 65 and old. But it's funny that such a memory, and I have lots of them from my teen years. So be careful because that's what's going to stick with you in your memory. Okay, so let's look a little bit at your brain. The brain actually physically changes during adolescence. So they call it structure changes in the brain. So if we're going to look, um, right, like this is a picture of one neuron, this whole thing. And a neuron is, of course, and there you have 100 billion-ish neurons. I forgot to be looking in the book. And by the way, um, last time I said turn to page this, turn to page that, and I realized I thought I was keeping us all together, right? Well, I have a paperback copy of the book, a paper copy. You don't. You have the one online, most of you. And so when I said page so and so, you had no idea what I was talking about. And so I didn't say pages here. So, but in your book, there's a picture of neurons, and there are so many in your brain. Like I said, like 100 billion. And there's a picture also in your chapter, and it's in blues, of showing you how the brain physically changes. It's quite interesting. Um, anyway, neurons are brain cells, nerve cells, um, and they are interconnected with each other. And notice that these little things called dendrites are like the little fingers, and electric impulses travel from the nucleus of the cell out across the dendrites, and here they put one bigger so you could kind of see, and there's the dendrites. And then from here, it's going to go to another cell. The electrical impulse will be going to another cell. Cells are not connected. And so when you have one cell to the next cell, this little part in between the cells, there's a blank space. And they have to jump across that, and that's called a synapse. Um, it's so interesting because as you form thoughts, you form more synapses, more communication between your neurons. So if you spent a whole bunch of time doing absolutely nothing, your neurons would not be generating. And so you would start to lose the capability. In this horrible experiment a long time ago, they did an experiment where they blindfolded kittens during the stages of their growth when their eyesight was developing, because they don't develop their eyesight till after they're born. And so they kept them blindfolded, and then after they grew up, they took off the blindfolds and they still couldn't see because the neurons had not been developed um, during that critical time. And so this is very important that you keep thinking, keep using your brain, and it forms more synapses, more neurons, and they're formed by obviously experiences that you have, but also genetics. And so those two things, um, keep forming more and more, and you can form them all through your lifetime. As people get older and um, things are not as flexible and you don't use brain cells as much, you lose a lot of the ability for memory and things like that. Okay, the brain function also changes, not just the structure, but the function. The changes in the prefrontal cortex are important. The prefrontal cortex, and there goes my phone. Let me just ignore it. And then, so the prefrontal cortex takes care of your reasoning, your problem solving, your creativity, your perseverance, focus. But the thing is, it starts maturing in adolescence, but doesn't finish until you're 25-ish. So some of your like problem solving things are not fully developed even in adolescence. And notice in this picture that there is like a covering. This is the dendrite again. And on the left one, you can see that the covering is good. I mean, it's intact. And that's called myelin. And myelination is when that covering thickens and it protects what's going on the dendrite. And the better the myelination, the faster the impulses and the more protected it is. The one on the right depicts a dendrite of someone who has MS. And you can see that the impulses can't go as fast and they're not as protected. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Myelination also helps teens use multiple parts of the brain simultaneously. So, like, you can be watching TV and talking to your friend on the phone. You don't do either of them superbly, but you can do two things at once. All right, let's look at the social brain. Oh my gosh, the social brain has where groups of the brain work together. So most species of mammals, including humans, get more social as they get to their teen years or their adolescence. And if you're an evolutionist, you say it's because all the species instinctively are ready to reproduce or have the physical capability to reproduce in adolescence. And so the brain shifts and starts talking to other parts of the brain, which makes people more social. And so So it's readiness for mating and for reproduction. And in humans, you will start to recognize smaller things about other people, like facial expressions. Do they like me because they smiled? Did they turn around and go, huh, don't want them? Then you probably wouldn't approach someone like that. But you watch facial expressions. You watch the moods of people when you're trying to think if someone is attracted to you. You'll look for little nonverbal types of things as well as verbal. And that's kind of interesting how the brain works that way. Okay, what is intelligence? Boy, that's a question for the ages, isn't it? We all know that it intelligence is emphasized a lot, like in our schools, where you take the tests and you see if, what things that you've remembered from the chapter. Your grades are based on tests and things like that, and people are focused on intelligence. You take the ACT or SAT to see what your potential is for college and for scholarships and things like that. Remember, IQ tests are not the only way to measure intelligence. There's tons of ways. Um, what's interesting in adolescence is highly intelligent people, and this is like a duh, highly intelligent people have less people to equal them. And so a lot of times people that are super intelligent don't have as many friends because you try to usually hang out with people about your same level. And so sometimes that's really difficult socially. Um, but your IQ is a real determiner in who you hang out with. You, activities help too, but people that are very bright don't usually hang out with people who are not at all bright. There's a certain give and take on that one. And if you ever want to have a debate with someone, ask them what is intelligence, because there are so many opinions on that. One other thing that happens is social cognition, where you are aware now of social rules and norms. You know you're not supposed to pick your nose in public, right? Well, younger kids, they don't care. If there's something there, they're going to pick it out. Will they wipe it on a Kleenex or wipe it on the chair? I don't know. But as an adolescent, you know what the rule is. You use a Kleenex and you don't do it in public, right? Um, and some people have the ability to step outside themselves and look at themselves and say, oh, I have really bad table manners. I got to work on that, right? But here, like if you have bad table manners, if you were on a date, you would be very careful about that. But if you're sitting around eating pizza at one of your friends' houses, maybe you're not going to be very careful with the social rules. There are people that you can swear in front of and people that you can't. Older siblings can do things that younger siblings can't. And so it's really interesting as to how the thinking changes in in teenagers as to hopefully they can get it right as to what rules can be done at different times. Okay. Adolescent risk taking. This is a huge thing to watch for. There's a thing called the behavior decision theory, where let's say you have this opportunity to do something super fun, but you could break your leg. Well, I'm going to weigh the cost of being popular and doing this versus, or the benefit of being popular doing this, having something to do with my friends versus hospital time with a broken leg. So I think it's kind of funny sometimes. Adults are not, they don't have the same ideas on risk taking that adolescents do. If you've ever seen the movies, the Jackass movies, if you've ever looked on TikTok for weird, you know, things that people do, you know that adolescents take risks. I can't say that's a good thing to do, but it is a developmentally appropriate thing to do. Hopefully, you come out of adolescence in one piece and you can move on to adulthood after that. But it's kind of fun to understand, I think, that it's pretty normal for adolescents to balance things in their mind. Well, an adult would probably say, I don't care if I'm popular or not, I'm not doing that. Whereas a teenager would be like, ooh, that would make me look very cool. And so I probably won't break my leg anyway, so I probably will be all right. So that's chapter 2. I hope it wasn't too long, um, but it is a fun chapter. I really enjoy that, and I hope you do well on your test. Bye.